I was gonna say that I was actually lucky to be able to see this whole album being performed live. They did I think it was the 25th Opeth anniversary, and I want to say this was 2015. And I went to New York. I remember I bought the VIP ticket because I needed to meet them. I met all of them. Michael trolled me because I was doing like a selfie with all of them, and as I was setting up the camera, he was like doing faces. So I was like, okay, let me also do a face. And then I did the face, I took the photo, and he came out super serious. And I came with this super silly face. He's a great guy. He's a great guy, actually. A lot of people think he's super, he's a stuck up or whatever, but he's not. He's like actually he really cares about the fans.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Let's Make a Mixtape. My guest on this week's episode is Weslie Negrón. Weslie Negrón is an accomplished bassist from Puerto Rico, and he currently serves as the bassist for the progressive metal band Moths. Weslie, like many bass players, including myself, started learning guitar, but ditched it in favor of the low end. Weslie's formal bass playing career started when he joined the death and thrash metal band Zafakon, during which time he contributed to the release of 3 records and 5 extensive tours across the continental US, sharing stages with bands like Creator, Soulfly, Fear Factory, and a small local band that you might not be all that familiar with called Metallica. After 7 years, Weslie shifted focus to Moths. Moths started off as a post-rock metal band and eventually evolved into a progressive metal powerhouse. Moths have since published 3 releases, an EP, a split record, and a full-length album. Their latest offering, Space Force, was received with critical acclaim in publications like Guitar World Magazine, Loudwire, Metal Injection, and Metal Sucks. Having spent some time at the Berklee College of Music focusing on music business studies, Weslie pursued a career on the business side of the music world as well. Weslie is also a huge prog nerd. That's progressive rock for all the uncool kids out there with your 4/4 time and your single key songs. I'm a prog rock nerd too. On today's episode, Weslie and I talk about music that was incredibly formational for me in my musical journey. Thanks for joining. Let's make a mixtape. Weslie, thank you so much for helping us make a mixtape. I'm very excited to talk about your selection. Opeth, Ghost of Perdition, off of the first record since Still Life that Steven Wilson did not produce, Ghost Reveries. I was a big Opeth fan back in the day. They definitely have a very warm place in my heart. So tell me why you picked Ghost of Perdition for this season of Let's Make a Mixtape.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I love talking about music. I love talking about my favorite music and my favorite songs, and even more so about Opeth. Opeth is my ultimate favorite band. I remember the first time I heard about them was probably for that Gigantor DVD. Like, we're touring with Megadeth Into Eternity, which is another one of my favorite bands, and Arch Enemy and a bunch of others. I remember the first song I heard was The Leper Affinity, and then I got into them and I started going back to their discography. I remember the first album I heard in its entirety was actually Watershed. I became a fan a little bit late in their discography, but then I went back and I remember hearing Ghost Reveries for the first time. And I remember listening to Ghost of Perdition, like that super slow intro. I remember it's a little bit embarrassing maybe to say, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people maybe went through this as well. That I remember it started because it starts with those strums, those super slow guitar strums. And I was like, okay, this is too low. Let me actually raise the volume. And when the whole band came in, my ears are exploded. One of my favorite things about Opeth has always been Mike's ability. For those who are not familiar with Michael, it's the singer and guitar player and basically a founder of the band. His ability to sing the deep growls without looking like he's doing any effort to do them, but also switch into the super angelical, clean vocals.
His voice is so beautiful.
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's funny. I heard someone that said that they don't like Opeth because they sound like Nickelback when he goes into the clip.
That's harsh.
Yeah, I mean, if I hear a Nickelback song that sounds like Opeth, I definitely want to have that on my playlist, you know? But yeah, that particular song was like, it's a journey, right? And it has all the different elements that basically describe what Opeth is, as far as the death metal side of the band, and then the prog side of the band. And I'm a huge prog guy, but I'm also into like the more extreme subgenres within metal. And I think that would be one of the songs. If someone tells me what is Opeth about, Ghost of Perdition is definitely that. And yeah, I tried to learn it on bass, and it's too hard. And also, that's another thing, right? Martin Mendez is probably my favorite bass player. That was probably the Opeth record that had my ultimate favorite lineup on all the instruments, and they really stood out. Every single one of them stood out in this record. And yeah, that's pretty much the reason why I chose this one. It's the perfect way to start an album as well. Very powerful, and it kind of sets up to the overall mood of the concept of the album, which is basically a guy who was possessed by the devil and killed his mother, and then he's dealing with the whole aftermath after that.
As you know, as you do.
Yeah, exactly. As anyone knows that someone that went through that. Again, that's another thing that I really admire about Michael's ability of writing. You know, he puts you in a certain mood. It's like goes along with the lyrics, and he has been able to do that since the beginning. So yeah, that's a really long answer as to why I chose this song.
It was a really good pick, and as you said, it really does set the tone for all of the ground that's going to be covered in the following record. I mean, it has those harsh, powerful moments that get dragged into this sad beauty and swirling mellotron and crazy guitar solos that are just mind melting. One reason I look fondly back on Opeth, and I think it was Watershed when I came around to them too. Harsh vocals are such a hard line in music. You're either pro harsh vocals or anti harsh vocals. There's not a lot of fence riding. And it's a really hard barrier for a lot of people to overcome. And it took me a while. It took me until Opeth, when I loved the beauty of the guitar solos and his voice, and I just kept listening to it. And as I kept listening to it, I kept realizing how the vocals were used as a different texture. It was just a different instrument, and you don't necessarily need to understand what's being said. You just need to be in the moment and really feel the intent behind how the vocals are being presented. And it finally clicked with me, I think, and broke me from that apprehension towards harsh vocals.
At the beginning, when I started listening to metal, one thing to understand is that, you know, I'm from Puerto Rico, so I didn't grow up in a family that listened to rock at all. It was mostly salsa, reggaeton, and merengue and bachata, which is all Latin stuff, right? Latin flavors. I remember from since I was a little kid, I wasn't really into that at all. So I started looking for other stuff. That's when Linkin Park came into my life. And from there, you know, everything started. Linkin Park was probably the first band. Well, it was the first band I got into that had screams, right? But then after that, I wasn't listening to anything like that. The main reason was because I thought it was satanic, and I grew up in a very religious home. So I wanted to go away from that. I didn't want my mom to say, hey, stop listening to that music. So I started getting into like the whole emo stuff. I grew up listening to all of that. And then I remember listening to Into Eternity, which was the first death metal band that got me into the extreme side of metal. And that's a band that's very rich, particularly in the Scattering of Ashes, which is actually my favorite record. That's the record where Stu Block came in and he started like doing the harsh and the super high falsettos and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, wow, the fact that one guy can be able to do all these voices is awesome. You know, segue to Opeth. Again, it was the reason why I bought that Gigantor 2 DVD. I remember I put it on I had a home theater in my room, and I was playing with my computer or whatever. And Into Eternity only has one song in that whole concert. So it was a little bit disappointing because I really bought the DVD just for them, but whatever. Let me go ahead and check the other ones. And I remember I was typing or whatever, and I hear this band that's playing like this super long song, and this guy's been screaming super low all the time. I was like, this is not really for me. And then I hear this super amazing clean vocals, like an angel. And then I looked back to the TV, it was the same guy. I was like, okay, no, this is something I need to check out. and I went to Watershed, and the rest is history. But honestly, I feel that this particular album, even though that they had their fair share of internal issues happening with the band at that time, they were also dealing with a little bit of backlash because that Ghost Reveries was the first album they released with Roadrunner Records. So a lot of people were like, they're gonna sell out or whatever. Obviously, I wasn't present in that particular period of time as it was happening, but as you read it and you understand the overall backstory around it, a lot of stuff makes sense, and I also know that this was the last album that Peter Lindgren, the lead guitar player, played on, and Michael actually made most of the lead guitars for this album as well. So it was a very instrumental point in my life to understand that this guy is one of my biggest influences as far as, creating music and the overall, his history as a musician in general. And he's so rich because he also like mixes a lot of rock from the 60s and the 70s that I had no idea existed. And this was the band, this was the album that kind of like, okay, why are they doing these weird sounds in the mix of this whole thing? Where is it coming from? And then I went to the King Crimsons, I went to the Bathories, even there were some of the bands that I wasn't really into. And then when I put it in perspective with what they were doing in this particular album, it makes sense. Also, the production in this album, it's probably, I want my albums to sound like that.
Right.
It's so tight. It's a great album. It's a great song. I think, again, it has all the different layers and all the different perspectives that Opeth has within their music. There's some really recognizable and sing-along riffs and the actual, lyrics, but also they have like their super mellow parts and they have this super technical, complicated. There's one riff at the end of the song before they go to the last super kind of slow that they do like the they do like a super tight section. It's like, what are you doing? What's and then they just go to the acoustic. It's so amazing. So
their use of dynamic is incredible, and the way that they're able to capture those really emotional moments through that composition is just, I mean, they set a high bar for doing that. It's really incredible what they've been able to achieve sonically, and this record's a phenomenal example of that for sure.
I was going to say that I was actually lucky to be able to see this whole album being performed live. They did, I think it was the 25th Opeth anniversary. And I want to say this was 2015. And I went to New York. I remember I bought the VIP ticket because I needed to meet them. I met all of them. Michael trolled me because I was doing like a selfie with all of them. And as I was setting up the camera, he was like doing faces. So I was like, okay, let me also do a face. And then I did the face, I took the photo, and he came out super serious. And I came with this super silly face. He's a great guy. He's a great guy, actually. A lot of people think he's super, he's a stuck up or whatever, but he's not. He's like, actually, he really cares about the fans. And that show, dude, like they played the whole album in its entirety. And then they played all my other favorite songs. They played The Upper Affinity, which was my first song I ever heard. They also played The Loudest Eater from Watershed, which was the song that got me into Opeth. I remember listening to Watershed and that song came out. It was like, oh, what's happening here? But yeah, it was a perfect show for me. It was probably, I've seen Opeth 14 times and they've never played in Puerto Rico.
Is that the most you've seen any band?
Yes. I remember the first time I saw them was for the Heritage Tour. I loved it, even though a lot of people were a little bit disappointed because they didn't play any heavy songs in that one.
Yeah, because that's when they really started leaning into that whole 60s, 70s prog a little bit harder than the death metal origins, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I also think if you listen closely to Watershed, you can see that his growls were not as good as they were previously, because you can actually hear him like and all the different layers of processing layers that he has on his vocals. It's very noticeable if you listen carefully. So it kind of made sense that they wanted to go via this route. Also, they're not young anymore. Playing extreme metal in your 60s and your 50s is not easy. So, but yeah, I remember like when I saw them first time, I was like, I need to see them. I'm going to make a promise to myself. I'm going to see them on every single US tour that they go.
Right on.
And so far, I've only missed 2 of them.
Wow, that's impressive.
Because of that, I've seen a lot of really cool bands supporting them. I saw Steven Wilson playing with them in upstate New York.
I've seen Porcupine Tree twice, and I've seen Steven I want to say Steven twice.
I saw Porcupine Tree in this last tour.
Oh yeah, how was the new lineup / dynamic and all that?
One of my favorite live records ever is Anesthetized.
Oh yeah,
I probably want to say it's my favorite record, my favorite live record
that
ever.
tour was incredible. That's the one that I think I caught him on.
You got to see it, man. That was for Fear of the Black Planet. That's the album.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah, I wasn't really into them then because I was a little kid. Yeah, this was weird because I'm a big John Weslie fan.
John Weslie.
So he's not there, and I'm also like Colin Edwin is one of my influences as well as a bass player.
For sure.
As a nerd, you kind of pick on these things, right? It's like it doesn't sound the same. It was a great show. Like the visuals were amazing, and Gavin is my favorite drummer ever. So
I've seen Gavin more than any of them. I think I saw Gavin the twice with Porcupine Tree, and then I saw Gavin with Pineapple Thief a few years back, and I saw Gavin as one of the 3 drummers on a King Crimson. Yeah, on a Crimson tour.
Yeah, I saw him there. That was that was actually the first time I saw him playing with King Crimson, and that was incredible.
Amazing. He's one of the best drummers working right now.
Yeah. This Porcupine Tree show was amazing as well. It just kind of had those 2 elements that I'm used to it already. Missing a little bit. Also, the set list was weird. They were playing a lot of songs from the new album, of course, but at the same time, like the classics that they picked were a little bit, I don't know, flat. I don't know. Like I said, I'm so used to Anesthetize in that particular order song is incredible that when seeing this was a little bit underwhelming, but it was a great show. And I saw Steven playing for the Hand Cannot Erase tour.
That record is one of my favorites.
So good. And when I saw them, Marco and Guthrie were not in the band anymore, but I did see them on their Raven tour with Marco and Guthrie, and it was Steven Wilson, Opeth, and Catatonia.
Whoa.
Upstate New York. I remember that was oh my God, that was such a perfect show for me. I sang every single song that was played that night.
That's amazing. What a lineup.
Yeah. And I was a little bit hopeful that they would play Storm Corrosion.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but they didn't. It was funny. I was like all the signs were there because Steven Wilson was actually playing one of the songs from the album with his band. And then they were going to play this show with Opeth. So it had to happen. But Steven Wilson played second. Opeth closed. Pretty sure if it would have been the other way around, they would have probably done it. So,
or even just playing Deadwing and Arriving Somewhere and having Michael do his thing.
I just dream about these things. I want another Storm Corrosion album. Yeah. I wasn't really big into the new Porcupine Tree. And I think we're kind of like going away from the Opeth stuff, but I mean, Steven is such an instrumental part of Opeth. Like it was since he joined or did the production on Blackwater Park, right?
Blackwater Park, Damnation, Deliverance, and I think one other.
He has done pretty much everything except obviously after Blackwater Park, but he has pretty much done everything except Ghost Reveries. But he also worked on some vocal stuff for Watershed, Heritage, and so on. They're 2 geniuses. As far as the prog side of things, I mean, Steven is... it's funny to say this a little bit because sometimes we love our musicians and the people that we admire to stay on a particular mental state that we know is going to keep making the music that we like.
Yeah.
But once they switch and they get married and get happy, they start releasing music that we're not into. It's like... Can you break up just for the writing session of this album and then use that?
I know exactly what you're talking about. Though I will say he is incredibly good at writing a solid pop song with a lot of complexity. Like there's that one track on To the Bone, Permeating.
The one that's yeah.
It got a lot of shit, but damn, if it doesn't get in your head, it's so catchy. I love that song. I think it's just perfectly crafted, and it does what it needs. It delivers that serotonin bubblegum, but also has the undertones of Steven's complexity and prog brain that feed into it. So I'm a permeating stan, I guess.
I remember listening to it for the first time. I was so taken by surprise, like, what are you doing? And then I remember that maybe like 15 minutes later, I was playing it again because it was just in my head. I mean, obviously, Steven knows how to kind of like play around with the chords, and the overall writing process of his is very, very smart. He knows how to handle emotions with the stuff that he writes. So it definitely makes sense that he knows, and this song sounds good. It's just maybe sometimes this kind of music goes tied in with the image, and I feel like me as a metalhead, that's the reason why I don't listen to popular music. You know?
Yeah.
So, it was a bit weird. It's definitely like it's done well.
Yeah.
But I rather listen to the sad, obscure, dark, depressive stuff that he does.
Man, Raven. Oof, that record is a downer. A prog opus of phenomenal composition, but just absolute downer.
I remember the first time I saw both the Drive Home and the Raven video.
Mhm.
I cried.
Yeah.
Both the first time I saw both of them, and when I saw them live, I remember crying for both times with Raven and the Routine video, even though it's not from that album, it's from the Hank and Race. But that video is like, and they had it playing live in the background, and I was like, what's happening? I came to have a good time.
There's he just has a way, and has always had a way with visuals. When I saw him on the it might have been the Hank and Outer Race tour, where they had that screen that made it kind of look 3D, and just
they would disappear in front of you.
Yeah, it was so cool.
Yeah, that's one of the things about him, and I think he has also mentioned it. We have to go back to his influences. We can talk about the Pink Floyds. Pink Floyd has always made a big theatrical thing of their shows. So I think, and that's one thing that a lot of they were kind of missing these days with these new acts, because they're just trying to. I mean, I get it. It's totally understandable. They want to make a party. They want you to have a good time. But whenever you go into these kind of immersive experiences, that Porcupine Tree is a band that puts you like in a certain mood. You're right there to see the band. You cannot, and you will not be distracted by anything else. It involves all your different senses. It's not only your eyes and ears that are involved in it. You feel it. And he's really good doing that. And he has been doing that. I say him because he's the face. He's the guy that we're talking about. But the whole band is actually great to be able to pull this through. So yeah, I mean, great bands, dude. Like it's great. It's great music, and there's such big inspirations to kind of see how we can make it in the DIY sense, how we can make some of the things that they do.
Well, I saw some photos of a recent show that you did for Space Force. It looked like there was an astronaut suit involved.
Yeah.
Was that a one-off, or is that something that you try to incorporate into your shows as a little bit of that big performative experience?
Yeah, I mean, with this particular record, what we wanted to do is kind of bring that immersive kind of thing, but do it as DIY as possible. Obviously, if you wanna invest into all the stuff that these big bands do, you have to have a lot of money, which we don't,
of course.
But yeah, for the release party we did last year, we wanted the venue. It's very dark, so we got 2 projectors that were simulating the stars all across the ceiling, and we actually dressed up as astronauts, because the video for Space Force has an astronaut in it. We usually do that particular thing when we have big shows. We opened for the Ocean Collective back in December, so we also wore the uniforms. We have a festival coming up in Puerto Rico in July. I know this is gonna come out later, but we have this festival happening in July where we're going to be using the uniforms as well. But yeah, we just tried to do it for the bigger shows. It's very hot to get into these. And I was also in a previous band where we would dress up every single show, and I don't want to deal with that anymore. In the end, what we want to do is to make sure that we have that immersive experience where people can have our music, it's a little bit, if you're listening for the first time and you're listening to us live for the first time, maybe a little bit crazy / hard to digest as the first listen. So we want to get other elements that we can get you and keep you engaged into the stuff until the music hits you. There will be a part that will hit you because we do so many things in our songs. So yeah, we try to be as creative as possible about it. We've done many things as in the with 2023, so 7 years of playing. And yeah, it's definitely inspired by these bands. I try to see as many bands as possible live. Every time I have a little bit of money, if I travel, it's mostly because I'm going to see a band. And I'm sometimes I kind of like hit myself like, dude, enjoy the show, because I'm being like very analytical about like the production side of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, these are ideas that are basically coming from bands like this, like Pink Floyd, Porcupine Tree, definitely Opeth. King Gizzard is another band that I'm really into. So,
oh yeah,
these ideas definitely come from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, Space Force is fantastic
Thank
record. I definitely hear the influences that you're talking about. I think you've channeled that well and have turned it into your own.
Yeah, it's exciting writing music with these guys. The cool thing about this band is that every single person in the band brings something. It's not like one of us writes something and then we kind of build from there. No, like we actually sit down and jam. We test out riffs, which is something that I feel that a lot of bands are also missing these days. Everyone has their own way of making music, right? And it works for sure. There's so many music out there right now that's so good. But I personally like the way that we compose music because everyone brings something into the table. And the cool thing about us is that we have like 3 or 4 bands that we're really into as a collective, but everyone listens to like super different things, and we kind of blend it in together. And I also think having no limits or no borders into like whatever we can do, like that's one of the things that whenever someone brings a riff that we know for certain is not going to work, it's basically like an unanimous thing where everyone's like, just a little bit weird. Let's kind of keep it for something else, but it's a bit weird for this, and that communication between the band really works well. It's very interesting because our drummer, for example, is he barely listens to music anymore because he works as an engineer, so he's constantly mixing and mastering. So his ear is like oversaturated at this point. But he mainly comes from a punk math rock background. And we have our lead guitar player, Jonathan. He's into math rock as well. And then we have Omar, which is our rhythm guitar player, who is into pretty much anything, from hip hop to black metal. And it's amazing. He comes with many great ideas. Our current singer, Mariel, which is not the one that sang on Space Force, she's really into symphonic metal. So we have different elements happening here, and I'm actually very excited to get people to hear our next music, our new music. It's really interesting. I want to say it's even heavier than what we've done before. And yeah, it's fun. It's fun. It's all about not having any sort of limitations as far as what the music is, and making sure that we're having fun as we're writing it.
Yeah, that's so important. Thank you so much for chatting with me and helping me make a mixtape. This has been a wonderful conversation. I'm glad we got to nerd out a little bit about Opeth and Porcupine Tree. It's always a nice throwback, and for me to be able to jump back into that realm that I hold so fondly. Anything that you want to promote or call out?
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, thank you so much. Yes, I definitely love having conversations about my favorite bands all the time. I don't actually get to speak a lot about it unless it's with my bandmates. So
sure,
it's always fun to get to meet someone that's excited about the music I listen to as well. Anyone that's interested in and curious about what Mods is like, you can follow us on socials. We're pretty much everywhere as Mods PR. We have the album Space Force out there. Plus we have our debut EP and split EP that we did with a band from Philly called The Stone Eye. We released that in 2020, so you guys can check it out. We also have a tour happening in the East Coast in October. We should be already announcing the dates. So if you're around, like I said, we're pretty much going to be covering the whole East Coast. So if you're around, please come out. Let's hang out. Let's have a beer and talk about Opeth.
As this episode airs, Moth is ramping up their East Coast tour. Be sure to check them out if they are coming to a town near you. Thank you so much to Weslie for joining me on this episode. I'm going to leave you with the title track from Moth's album, Space Force. Thanks for tuning in. sure to subscribe or write a review within your podcast service. Show notes and transcript can be found at letsmixtape.com. You can follow the pod on your preferred social network of choice at Let's Mixtape. The show's theme music was composed by the one and only Scotty Sandwich. Tune in next week as I talk with Ali Morton, a musician based in Basque Country and frequent contributor to Global Garage.